Hi everyone. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the use of metaphors in Battles of the Breath. So you should have watched this film. You might have felt a little bit confused about the film. You might have felt like, wait a minute, there's all these images going on. I'm getting all these pictures of things, and I don't understand how they're supposed to relate. The whole thing seems like it's just put together randomly. Again, as I mentioned before, if you completely understand everything that I'm giving you, then I'm probably giving things that are going to be too easy. So this should have been somewhat difficult, but we want to talk about how we can get unstuck from that difficulty. Let's think about how that happens. By the way, before I go any further, let me just mention that this film was in fact made by a former student of mine. I just like to mention that so that we understand that this is not some crazy thing that came from someplace that by somebody who's completely different from you. This is a former student of mine that made this, and so it should be kind of accessible. And let's go through and think about again, how is it that we can get unstuck from understanding what's going on in this film by thinking more carefully about the ways in which metaphors are going to be used. So you see, I've paused here on this image here. This is one of the first images that we get in the film. The image also shows up throughout the film in various places. So you can see if you look down at the bottom where I'm kind of scrolling through that it shows up again there at 119. We go through a little farther. It's going to show up where there at 221. We go through again, it's going to show up here at the very end. So it's at the beginning and at the end, and at least a couple of times in the middle. That becomes important because one of the things that we can think about, and is something that you understand, but you need to be able to apply it when you're looking at literature, is that if things are being repeated, they're important. That's the reason why I repeat all the time that you should contact me. At every email I send you, I'm pretty much going to say, make sure to contact me if you have any questions. That's because I think it's really important that you contact me if you have any questions. See, I got it in there one more time. If somebody repeats something a lot, it means that it's important. So this image keeps repeating throughout the film. And so this filmmaker is telling us, watch out for this. This thing matters. Pay attention to it. And so you may not know why yet, but you at least know, wait a minute, there's something going on with this oil and water. There's something I'm supposed to understand about it. What is it? And if we just think about the oil and water literally, we think about the fact that look, there's some water and we're pouring oil into it, and we see the bubbles because they don't mix. If we think about that in the literal sense, oil doesn't mix with water, it doesn't matter to us. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I know that oil and water don't mix. What does that have to do with this film that starts out with pictures of the Taj Mahal, which is one of the most famous buildings in India, and then other images of Indian culture. And then I've got people getting on an airplane in here. Again, you can see. If you look down at the bottom where I'm scrolling through, people getting on an airplane, they get on there. You can see out of the airplane window there at one point right there, and then going through uh, after India, suddenly we end up with an American flag, right? A U.S. flag. And so then we're going to end up there. What does this oil and water have to do with any of that? And then we get all these other kinds of images of this girl, people getting dressed to go out. These kind of strange images, psychedelic kind of images of things going on in people's heads. And so we're not sure about how that's supposed to work. But if we think about this as a metaphor, right? If we say that what's happening here is not that oil and water don't mix literally, but if we think about oil and water not mixing as a metaphor for, let's say, how somebody thinks about their own identity, how they think about the sense of moving from India to the United States, and to what extent their cultures don't mix together, then we're like, oh, all right. When I see this as a metaphor, then everything else makes sense. And you can go back through this film and think about how it is talking about this issue of trying to fit together Indian and American identity. We've got this kind of American food in here. Food is going to obviously going to be a big part of the culture. American food. Again, I'm going through from the. I'll just click it up here. We've got the American food that's going to show up. This kind of fast food that's seen as typically American. Sorry, the it lags a little bit. This fast food that might be seen as typically American, but then we had this image of this woman contemplating, something that seems very, very Indian. And so, how do we put those two things next to each other? What are we saying? Well, we might be saying on some level that those two elements of her identity are not going to be mixing together, which is, again, exactly what is going on with this oil and water. So, if we think about this as a metaphor, then it begins to make much more sense. As I said before, like I said, this not recognizing that we have a metaphor is going to be one of the main ways that you are going to get confused about things. One of the main reasons why you may get confused about something, because image, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with it. If we say, oh, it represents something else, as we're doing some kind of a comparison here, then it's going to end up making much more sense. For the exercise for this film, what I want you to do is to go through and look at some of the images that we're going to have in the film and think about how they are relating back to that central metaphor of not mixing oil and water, not mixing together. So you'll be talking about some of the images that you see and seeing how they fit back with that. Because realize that if that's the big idea, if this central metaphor of oil and water not mixing, or these two cultures rather not mixing, is going to be the big idea, then everything else involved in the film is going to fit in with that. If it doesn't, then we're thinking about, well, what's it doing there? It's just kind of random stuff. And that's what made you confused if you were confused when you first saw this, because you're feeling like, I feel like images are just random. I feel like things just show up. But that's because you didn't understand what the main metaphor was. And again, once you understand that, then we might go, oh, now I see how all things fit together inside of a larger idea. And you're going to do the same thing when you go as we go through next week, or later on this week, and then definitely more next week as we begin to look at the poems. You might get confused about some of the poems we see at the beginning, but one of the things you want to make sure that you do when you get confused is say, wait a minute, where am I seeing something metaphorical here? Because if I can understand the larger metaphor here, I can probably understand what everything else is supposed to be doing. So again, for the homework assignment, I want you to talk about some of those specific images that you're going to be seeing and think about how they fit in with that larger idea. So keep all that in mind as you move forward with the next part of the assignment. And of course, take the embedded quiz here.